Move on to introduce Pierre. So Pierre, welcome and good evening on this rather chilly, miserable English evening, but cheers.
Good evening, Anna. Thank you. Good evening, members, ladies, gentlemen, wherever you are viewing from. As always, really excited to be bringing you a live event, another live event to you. Tonight, our focus is on one vineyard in the region of Rioja, a vineyard that grows some of the region's finest and most delicious grapes, and one that was pioneering for being amongst the first Rioja to be bottled as a single vineyard. And that vineyard site is called Contino. And I'm delighted that this evening we are joined by Jorge Navascues, who oversees the winemaking and has done so for several years. Jorge, cheers from the UK and welcome.
Cheers, Pierre, and thank you so much to give me this great opportunity. Can you hear me, right?
We can hear you. Go for it.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I was telling you that I'm so excited to be here with you. So thanks again to let me be here. For many reasons, I'm at home right now, which is it's always strange for me to be at home so early. Secondly, because I'm in depth with you with the Wine Society, because I still remember my first day over there with you. And I really fell in love with your team, with you, and of course, because we are talking about Contino, about Cune. And so I'm really happy to try to bring the goodness of Contino to the Wine Society members. So I'm full of beans. I'm getting ready to do my best, and of course, let's go on. Let's have fun while tasting some wines, and of course, discovering the greatness of Rioja and Spain.
Thank you, Jorge. So, Jorge, do you want to tell us a little bit about the history and the background to Contino? We've also got some slides and some great photography that your team sent through to us in advance. So, but it'd be good if you could, give us a roundup of the history. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, well, Pierre, I saw many Instagram live since lockdown, and in some of them I got bored about hearing the history of some wineries, and I promised myself in my next live I wouldn't talk about the history because sometimes it's a little bit bored, but paying attention at Cune and Contino, I think it deserves a short speech about its history because it's one of the oldest wineries of the world. If I'm right, I think Cune, it's close to be 142 years old, and it's something to talk about. So well, but I'm gonna try doing so quickly. And well, Cune was founded in 1879. This is very old, but Contino was established in 1873. But apart from the real history, I like to tell you some technical and romantic history at the same time, because one of the main reasons to understand that Cune was focused at Contino was that one of the best Spanish red wines in terms of aging from the 50s and 60s is Viña Real. Viña Real winery and wines, of course, belongs to Cune as well. And Viña Real was made with a bit of grapes from Contino. And that's the point to understand that Cune's winemakers in the 60s or 70s paid attention at Contino, and they wanted to go straight to this single vineyard and founded in 1973 the actual Contino winery. Here I am. So apart from this romantic story between Viña Real and Contino, let's talk a little bit about the location, the Contino's location, where Contino is based. Contino and Viña Real belongs to Rioja Alavesa, while Cune is based or located in Rioja Alta. Of course, I think all of you know that Rioja has three main sub-regions: Rioja Alta, Rioja Alavesa, and Rioja Baja. And I think that Rioja Baja is a great wine region too, but I think that the further you move to the north and in Rioja, the better you're doing, because I think that there are a lot of people talking about the history and a lot of people talking about the altitude in my country. It looks a matter of testosterone between growers, because a lot of people are talking about altitude, which is very, very important in a south country as Spain is. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget latitude. So Rioja Alavesa is one of perhaps the northern major wine region of Spain. And please don't forget the latitude. The northern, the better. And I think the location of Contino is one of the secrets of its quality, because we are enjoying the goodness of not Mediterranean, but warmer climate weather than the north part of Rioja Alavesa or Rioja Alta. But at the same time, we are getting the greatness of the Sierra Cantabria mountains, which are a natural keeper to avoid a lot of rainy days. In the other side of the Sierra Cantabria hills, there are a lot of rainy days. This is a real Basque country. And so we are taking these thousands of sun hours a year, but with a cooler weather in summer. So at the same time, there is one of the biggest and most important rivers of Spain called Ebro River. I think you can see. Thank you so much for the picture. It's very helpful. So this river is helping to us great humidity at night. At the same time, it's this natural cool weather coming from the mountain, from the Sierra Cantabria hills, and with this humidity from the Ebro Valley River at night, is giving to us a lower ripeness. And they are our natural keepers of freshness and acidity. Well, about the uniqueness of Contino is not yet a matter of the location. It's a matter, in my opinion, about this. It's a single estate. We are talking about the first single vineyard of Spain, and which is very funny stuff today, because I think that since the last 10 years, the 90% of the wineries in all over the world are trying to imitate the Burgundy style, a Burgundy classification about Premier Cru, Grand Cru, Village, or of course, single vineyard. But for example, in Rioja has been blending not different vineyards, but different villas, actually. Contino was the first single state winery in Spain, and have a look this, because all of our vineyards are located in the same place. There are 62 hectares together. It looks very easy for a winemaker, but I'm so brave, and I'm a very competitive man. And I still remember my first day at Contino. I told myself, well, it's going to be quite easy, very old vines in the same place. It's going to be a walk in the park, as you said, but it's not, because it's the same vineyard, but there are plenty of different kind of soils, which is one of the other great big secrets from Contino. And for me, it's quite funny to see how the Cunes property of the Cunes owners in the past were ahead its time, because now today we are talking about one of the most classic and iconic and oldest wineries from my country, but at the same time, Contino, it's one of the trendiest because we are selling or making wines from the single vineyard. And so I think it's quite funny how the wine business changed a lot in a short period of time. And well, for me, talking about the single vineyard, talking about Contino, apart from the different kind of soils, there are something very and quite relevant, and it's a matter of vintage, you know, because I think it's the best way to get because it takes a while to get the hand of knowing a state, but working in a single state, just working with your own grapes is the best way to check the difference between different harvests. And for example, we were talking earlier, Pierre, between 2018 harvest, 2020, and I'm a wine consumer too, a good one indeed. And sometimes I like to focus in this kind of wineries because when you are interested to know the quality, the vintage, the quality of the different vintage, for example, Contino is one of the best Spanish winery in my region to see or to check or to compare different vintages. And this is one of the best magics, one of the miracles of Contino or single estate.
Jorge, tell us a little bit about the grapes that you grow in the Contino vineyard. Which are the main grape varieties?
Of course, we are focused at Tempranillo because Tempranillo is the Rioja's king grape. Well, before to talk about the Tempranillo and the other red grapes, I think that I must say that, to be honest, I don't remember exactly the percentage. I'm so sorry, but perhaps 95% of our grapes are red. We are paying attention and investing a lot of time and money trying to get premium white wine too. Since many years ago, but it's a tiny production, a small production for us. So we are focusing on red wines from our beginning, mainly Tempranillo. Perhaps it's the 90% of, well, 88, 90% of the red grapes, the Contino red grapes. Bordeaux Tempranillo, Graciano. Graciano is amazing and standing. It's not as a well-known variety as Tempranillo is, but Graciano is a typical variety from Rioja too, and it's one of the greatest, perhaps the only one, it's the only good stuff in relation with global warming, because 20 years ago, Graciano, in my opinion, was a very difficult variety to work with because it has a very strong dry tannins and high acidity. But now, with global warming, its ripeness is getting better year on year. And in this case, Contino was pioneer too, because I think Contino was the first winery, maybe in the world, releasing 100% Graciano. When people think about Graciano, it's always thinking at Contino. And Tempranillo, Graciano, Mazuelo is known as Carignan in the rest of the world, which is, for me, is one of the variety to the future. I really love it because I think it's like a softer Graciano. This variety keeps really well the acidity, has more tannin than garnacha, for example, and less than Tempranillo, but it pairs really well with Tempranillo. And of course, we're working with garnacha too. As you know, I'm a garnacha lover because I grew up in a garnacha family, and I'm the third generation of garnacha winemakers. Well, these are our red grapes: Tempranillo, Graciano, Mazuelo, and garnacha. And in relation with the white wines, Viura is the queen of Rioja's white grapes. We have a small plant of Malvasia, a very old plant from Malvasia. And of course, we are working very hard in white garnacha because we really believe that it pairs really well with Viura. And I think perhaps she's going to be with Viura the next big white grape from Rioja.
So actually, Contino, has been quite groundbreaking in the sense that single vineyard bottlings are really the first in Rioja to do that, and also the first in Rioja to do single varietal bottlings, starting with Graciano and more recently Garnacha, which does show that there's a real sort of spirit of innovation at Contino, despite the legacy and the history behind these.
Yeah. It's true. I think, but the problem with selling wines by variety, I think it's a mistake. Of course, we've got to put a name to give a name to our wines. But for me, Contino Garnacha is not Contino just Garnacha because it's a very special plot. Perhaps we should change the name of our wine to Contino Graciano from San Gregorio microplot. But I really love the way of Cunis property, trying to keep the same identity and trying to sell the same style, and of course paying attention in these varieties. I arrived to Contino. I joined this winery in 2017 in August. I've been working very, very hard in viticulture more than in winemaking because for me, the 60-75% of the quality of the wine is coming from outside, not from the winemaking. And I've been paying attention in these varieties because the Tempranillo's behavior in Contino is quite different than La Guardia, which is quite close. And talking about varieties and releasing single variety or single grapes wines, I really loved the work with these microplots, thinking about, for example, Mazuelo. We are investing a lot of time in Mazuelo, and perhaps would be the next wine from Contino. But of course, Pierre, answering your question, Contino was a pioneer to releasing microplot with single varieties, and for me, it's great. I was telling all of you that I really love Contino wines to discover the difference between vintage. I really love these wines at the same time to comparing a single 100% Garnacha with the Garnacha from other parts of Rioja or from the Ebro Valley or from other parts of the world.
So Jorge, talking a bit more about the wines, the Wine Society follows the Contino wines year in, year out. We thought participants in this Zoom event would be interested to hear a little bit more about the Contino wines that are currently available on our that we're currently selling. We've got the Contino Blanco 2018, which we have on our website at the moment. Could you tell us a little bit more about that wine? Because I know it's a wine that you've evolved the style subtly and improved it quite a lot in recent years.
Yeah, of course I can, and I love it because I think there is no best way to talk about our wines, or at least to start with, than the Contino white wine, because it's a personal bet to the future. I think, but not just talking about Contino, generally speaking about La Rioja. La Rioja is a really well-known appellation in all the world, but when wine consumers on earth are thinking about Rioja, they think about our red wines. And I think we have the availability or capacity to get the same quality with the white wines than the red ones. So, personally speaking about Contino Blanco, our first vintage from this new Contino Blanco took place in 2017 harvest that I had the pleasure to work quite close with Jesus Madrazo, the previous winemaker. And we asked ourselves, why not to change a little bit the style of this wine? Because we shouldn't forget that Viura doesn't have the same strength than Chardonnay or Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc. It's a thinner variety. And so we thought that it was too hard to age these wines in 100% barrels and new oak. And we changed a little bit of winemaking of this wine in 2017, just aging 50% of the wine in oak and 50% in concrete. Of course, we decided to pick up our grapes earlier because I really wanted to focus on pH and acidity, trying to get more higher acidity and lower pH, which means this wine is going to be developed in a right way for more than 10 or 15 years. And I really believe that we can get the same level than it with Contino white wine than perhaps Viña del Olivo. Of course, it's going to take 4 or 5 more years. But talking about this 2018, for many wine writers and from all over the world, the 2018 was one of the best harvests from the last 10. I really agree with them because 2017 and 2019 are very similar in terms of ripeness. Both summers were very hot and dry. And 17 and 19 have more concentration, perhaps the same freshness, but in my opinion, they are a little bit fatter wines. But this 18, I really love the 2018 because, in my opinion, in terms of white wine, for example, the alcohol level was 0.4 lower, the pH 0.1 lower, and the acidity is 0.5 grams liter higher, which means it's perhaps right now it doesn't have the same complexity that 2017, 1 year ago, but it has a more identity, in my opinion, if we think about Viura. And of course, it is developing really, really well, better than expected at the beginning, because 2018 was the wine from this harvest are very good, but I'm brutally honest. And 2018 was one of the most difficult harvests I've made in my life.
Wow!
Because sometimes we check the harvest, not tasting the wine, enough thinking about our job while harvesting. And 2018 was very, very difficult. There were rainy days while harvesting, and this harvest was strange in relation with ripeness, because this lower sugar level, this higher acidity content, made us a lot of questions, because I spent from the first week in August to the harvest date, I spent a lot of hours walking the vineyard, eating millions of berries, and I prefer to decide the harvest date through my grape tasting more than check one analysis, And looking at the analysis, some people told me those grapes are not full ripened. And I asked myself, why not? If you go out to the vineyard, if you look at the vines, the leaves, and you taste some berries, you realize the grapes are ready to be picked. And this 2018 was a nightmare for me, because Yeah, I saw full ripeness in the vineyard, but in the lab, I was crazy because the sugar level and acidity was very strange. But after doing that, in January 2019, 1 year ago, tasted this, well, no, 2 years ago, sorry, tasting this quality harvest was absolutely delicious. And 2018 is getting better year a year. I think that's the reason to understand these wine writers are giving a lot of scores and think that this 2018 is going to be one of the best harvests from the last 10.
Excellent. Thank you, Jorge. And then could you also just compare, we have Olivo and the Gran Reserva currently as well available. Could you just say a few words about those two wines before we move into talking about the 9-3 series?
Yeah, well, they are extremely different wines or styles. You know, the Contino Gran Reserva it expresses really well the good old days from Rioja style from 60s or 70s. I really love this style. If I was asked any time, what's your favorite Contino wine or the best wine from Contino's lineup? Well, it'd be a difficult question for me, but perhaps I should say it's Viña del Olivo because it's a great wine. But for me, the Gran Reserva is in the same level of quality. In terms of style, they're extremely different. But I think we are risking losing our identity in Spain these days or the last years. And it looks like some people are scared to keep working in the old classification and Reserva, Gran Reserva, or even this kind of wines, very classic. But I really love this Villarreal wine or Imperial or Contino from 60s, 70s, or 80s. For example, this Contino Gran Reserva being sold by Magnum, just thinking about its development. I really love Contino Gran Reserva in terms of this uniqueness about its classic style, but with fruit, because it's an oaky wine, but I really love the balance between fruit, grape, and oak. It aged really well. It aged in the right way for more than 30 years. So I really love the Contino Gran Reserva. But Viña del Olivo is, for me, it's extremely different wine being made in the same vineyard. But you know, it was one of the most iconic wines. Well, indeed, it is. It still is one of the most iconic wines of Spain. But it has a trendier style. It has more fruit, more concentration, more oaky flavors in a right way. And if you love this kind of wine with more structure, with body, yummy, and fruity, you know, perhaps I'd say that Viña del Olivo is the best wine from Contino's lineup because it has everything. As I told you before, I'm a wine consumer, and Viña del Olivo was one of my favorite Spanish wine since 10 years ago. When I was asked by Cones Property to join Contino, I asked myself, what are you doing with Viña del Olivo? You are going to make one of your favorite wines. So Viña del Olivo is one of the most iconic Spanish wines in terms of this trendy style, fruit, concentration, and a good expression of Tempranillo. Perhaps Gran Reserva is a good expression of La Rioja, all the style, but Viña del Olivo is a good expression of Tempranillo. It reflects really well the goodness of Tempranillo, the goodness of this dark and red fruit with acidity, with a really well balanced between alcohol and tannins. And so for me, they are outstanding. Both are outstanding wines, and depending on the day, depending on the company, and depending on your taste, you should try both. But but because it's a difficult question for me, what's better?
You've described the stylistic difference, I think, very well. Olivo is really about the vineyard and about Tempranillo, and the Gran Reserva is almost a more classically molded expression of really top quality Gran Reserva Rioja.
But Pierre, sorry about that, because for me, the quality of the wine coming from outside, it is quite funny tasting or comparing a very old Gran Reserva from 80s with one of the first vintage of Viña del Olivo, and they're closer than I think. They were closer than I think, because for us, there is like a pyramid, and so the most important stuff is the vineyard. Later of the wine making, but it's my way. I'm trying to explain that the character of Contino is upper than the style of the wine. Perhaps this Gran Reserva and Viña del Olivo right now are very different style, but maybe 10 years later, they will be very close, because the real Contino's character is more relevant than these styles, which is for me the greatness of the greatness of Contino.
Exactly. Now, just before we go to questions, Gil, who is controlling the slides, could you go back to one of the first, I think it might have been the third slide, which shows a vineyard with an olive tree in the shot. Not that one, there's another one, that's it right there. So that is an extremely old olive tree in the vineyard, hence the name del Olivo, named after that olive tree. And the olive tree, when the Wine Society first visited Contino and first started buying Contino, which was in, I think, 1970, it was 1970, we were told, we asked how old was the olive tree, and we were told it was 900 years old. In 2010, the society in Contino was celebrating 30 years of working together. So we decided to blend a wine. I was given access. It's a dream come true to be able to go to Contino and put together a special wine for members, exclusively for members. And we decided to call it 930, as in 930 years of the vineyard, of the olive tree's age, based on the 2010 vintage. And it was immensely popular with members, and we have since repeated repeated that year on year. And actually, I've just noticed a comment. You're right. It was 1980, not 1970. That would make it 40 years. It was 1980. We release the 9.3 series when the vintages are good, and we release it on Primeur, and the most recent release was 937 last year. We will be doing 938. I haven't tasted the blend. I am going to be unable to come out and do the blend together, but we will do it together virtually. Jorge, could you give us a quick indication, because I know a lot of members will be interested to know what to expect from Contino 938.
Well, before to talk about the 938, about this harvest again, I must say that the 9.3 series are extremely good and funny stuff for me, because obviously I didn't know this wine before to get Contino, and once our good friend Carlos de Laje let me sit down with you blending this wine, I really discover the goodness of this relationship. It's very, very old. This relationship, as you perfectly say, is longer than 30 or 40 years. For me, it's not like a private label, because Contino is not making this kind of wine for any company, but it's not a private label. It's a really good selection between our job and your aim. And the 9.3 series these wines are one of the most special wines of Contino, at least for me, because I'm really having fun blending this wine with you. And of course, with your help, we were aware that the style of the wine that we were looking for, and it's like I told you many times today, I think it's a funny game as well to discover the difference between vintages, because one of the Pierre and Jorge goals with 9-3 series is try to keep the same identity and personality of these 9-3 series every year, which is very difficult because of all of vintages are extremely different between them. But this 9-3, today, this is my wine. This is Contino Reserva 937, and it's absolutely delicious right now. And dipping into the next one in 2018, sadly we weren't able to taste together this year, Pierre. I'm missing you a lot in these blending days, but I'm pretty sure they will come back. But the 2018 harvest and dipping about the 938 series wine, in my opinion, I'm tasting right now the 937, and I have some samples here from 938 to taste tomorrow, because I wasn't on time today to do it in the winery. And 2018 harvest of vintage was, as I told you before, extremely difficult while deciding the harvest date. But it's day by day, I think this wine is being improving. Perhaps the worst thing about 938, it's the most different wine from the previous 9-3 series wines, and it's not the best in terms of style, but in terms of quality, in my opinion, it's going to be one of the best because it has more uniqueness than the previous one. Why? Because perhaps the influence, the balance between oak and fruitness is better. It's been better made than the previous one. It's not about me, it's about the wine, because the 938 has higher acidity. The quality of the tannins are one of the best that I've seen in my life, because they are softer. Sometimes these kind of wines that must be developed in the right way for 20 years, they are releasing to the market. You can feel some dryness a bit, but this 938 is ready to be drunk today, which is amazing for me. And another one thing about this 938 is the nose. Let's move on to the Rioja, to my region, to other region, to Ebro Valley. Let's talk about garnacha to explain some uniqueness from 2018 too. There is natural positive reduction in 2018 wines. It will take a 1 hour explanation because it's quite technical. But 2018 wines has a natural reduction, and positive reduction is a natural keeper on the nose for me to the future. This 938 series wine from Contino has this touch of reduction, and it's lovely nose because it keeps really well this outstanding Tempranillo and Graciano that we are working with, but at the same time it has this different touch from 935, 7 or 6, and for me this nose is more interested right now because it's a little bit different. And of course on the palate, as I told you, the quality of the tannin, the harmony between oak and fruitness. And of course, if I was a wine investor, I'll choose the 938 because I'm pretty sure, we are pretty sure this harvest is going to be one of the best in terms of aging.
Excellent. We look forward to it, Jorge. Thank you. I think now we're slightly running over, and I'm sure if it's anything to go by the amount that I've seen popping up, I guess we've probably got quite a few questions, Anna.
We do indeed. I thought I'd start with a small question of my own, Jorge, but firstly, thank you both as well for a lovely, insightful presentation. Jorge, you've just been talking obviously about the Grenache having reduction, and I just wondered if you might be able to explain to members what that means for the wine, so maybe how it will age, but also what flavors reduction might give the wine.
Well, perhaps reduction sounds in a negative way. It perhaps it's not the best English word to explain that. The nose is a little bit close, which means that it doesn't express the fruitness, the youthness, and the intensity is medium, is not very high. But for example, the reduction, in my opinion, is quite easy to find in some Shiraz from Rhone Valley, and in a sun country as Spain is, sometimes or some harvests we are lacking these kind of flavors, because the Spanish wines are very direct. They are very honest from their beginning. Sorry, but I prefer, talking about a serious wine, I'd rather to have these kind of flavors, natural flavors, keeping the fruitness to the future. It's not a reduction in terms of sulfur, in terms of ugly flavors, But it's my way to explain. It's a great flavors, natural keeper of flavors, and I think this reduction is going to give to the wine more longevity and, of course, more complexity. That's the point. This kind of flavors are giving to the wine more complexity, because 938 is similar than 937. It has the same goodness as 937, with this touch of different kind of flavors. In my opinion, it's a more complex wine.
Fantastic, right? Thank you, Pierre. Would you agree on the sort of reductive front, that it can act as a bit of a preservative, perhaps make wine more complex?
Yeah, I mean, reduction is essentially the opposite of oxidation. So it's when there's not enough oxygen in the wine, and therefore by definition more protective. It can be a fault if in excess, but when it's really judged well, it adds an incredible sort of level of complexity of flavor to certain wines. And when you've got as good a palate as Jorge's, or as good a nose as Jorge's, you can really identify when reduction adds a certain level of complexity. It sounds very scientific, and it is, I suppose. Nothing's being added to the wine by the way. People are thinking, oh my God, what is that? No, nothing's being added. It's just a way, or the way that the wine is made and the way that the wine is fermented. It's more protected from oxygen, and therefore has less oxygen in the wine when it's bottled.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thank very much. Whilst we're on the subject of preservation in that sense, it's probably a nice time to ask you about drinking times. We've had Roland asking how long you should leave the Grand Reserva before drinking. Steve has asked, do you like to drink your wines when young or older? And a member earlier actually voiced a view that perhaps some Grand Reservas of very old vintages are too old, that the winemaking wasn't good enough to support how long people have kept them. So I suppose the main question, Jorge, is how long would you recommend keeping your wines? What drinking window would you give? And then personally, do you prefer them younger or older?
Well, to be honest, I prefer older ones, because well, the first bottle of 1974 Contino wine I tried in my life took place in London. And this day I realized I had a big responsibility, because Contino wines must be developed rightly for 20 or 30 years. And of course, I love, because it's not very, winemaking speaking, it's quite difficult in the south of Europe to get wines for 20 or 30 years old in the right way. I rather to enjoy them. The older, the better. But as a wine consumer, again, I prefer to buy a 12 bottle box and open a bottle year a year and discover, enjoy the aging of the wine, because that's the secret. I think it's not a matter of younger and older. My answer would be the older, but as a wine consumer, I rather to keep the wineries in my winery or at home and drink them year by year. It's quite difficult to me to keep them on the winery, because it's very, very difficult. But I love to discover the development of the wines from, for example, if we are releasing 2011 Gran Reserva, of course it's enjoyable wine. It was aging in the winery for 4 years before to be released. But I love to check it, to try to discover it and enjoy them time by time. But my answer would be the older, the better.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I hope that answers the members' questions. Obviously, if you have a particular wine, members, you want to find out when you should or could be drinking it, do let us know and we'll reply about specific wines over email.
Anna,
yeah.
Sorry, and there was one of the questions in the original that you mentioned was about Gran Reservas sometimes being too old or something along those lines.
Yes.
And I couldn't agree more that, so one of the sort of weaknesses of the aging requirements in Rioja and Ukraine is that it doesn't specify the quality of the fruit or the quality of the grapes or the quality of the wine. It just specifies that that wine has to have aged for a certain period of time. So that means producers can put any old wine, inferior wine, into a barrel, age it for 5 years, and then call it Gran Reserva. So it's really, really important that you follow a producer who you trust and who you know puts their best quality fruit in Gran Reservas, usually only makes Gran Reservas in the vintages that are, 5-star vintages. Yes, it's easy. It's a great term and a great way to help pick Spanish wines, but be wary. And it does explain why, on the high street and often in the supermarkets, you can find wines that are Gran Reservas for £6 or if not less. It's because the raw material that goes into those Gran Reservas is not the same quality as Gran Reservas from places like Contino.
And Gil behind the scenes has made a fantastic point again, that the quality of the oak isn't measured in any way, so you can sort of have average grapes in average oak.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So on that point, Pierre, I actually have a question for you. So I apologize for throwing you under the bus here. I'm just finding it, but it is relevant. But it was essentially about that, compared to many of our competitors, we release Contino wines earlier than some of our competitors. So what's your rationale for when you release the Contino wines?
So that's quite interesting, because I'm not sure that we do release them earlier, actually, is the answer. So actually, if you look what we're selling at the moment, we're selling the 2010 Gran Reserva. That's over 10 years old. We're selling the 2014 Olivo and the 16 Olivo. So the 16 is a newer release. In March, we will be offering Contino Reserva 2015, which is a wine that we bought and kept back. But what we do is that when Contino release their wines or their new vintage, what we do is we do offer them initially when they're released, because we know that other competitors do the same, and we prefer members to be buying those new releases from us first, given that Contino, the volume of wine that's made is relatively limited. Therefore, we would prefer to be at the top of the list. So I hope that answers the question.
I think so, yes. Thank you very much. Jorge, we've had a few questions around when you started at Contino. So if you wouldn't mind being able to tell members a little bit about your first vintage, and maybe for how long you worked with Jesus. Many members either remember Jesus or have spoken fondly of him on the chat. And then also what changes you've made since you joined.
Well, I joined Contino in 2017 on August, which was like a dream. Like my dream came true this time, you know, because from night to day, I be part in one of my favorite wines from my country, and I was extremely happy at this time. But once I put my foot in Contino, I was scared, I was nervous, but I had the privilege and the big lucky to work quite close with Jesus, the first vintage, because Jesus was working at Contino for I don't remember exactly, 22, 24 years. And we were working together for 3 months, I think, for the harvest. And he told me everything about Contino secrets. He gave me all his knowledge about the microplots, the winemaking, the oak, the coopers, the cork suppliers. You know, I think they were the busiest months in my life, but I had fun working with him because we were close friends. We are close friends since I think from 2002, and it was a privilege for me. And in terms of what am I doing right now compared with Jesus, my first goal being the continuous head winemaker is keeping the same identity and quality. And I think it's not a matter of winemaker. It's not a matter of a person, of a man. Contino, I think I told you 2 or 3 times today, Contino's wines are made by a uniqueness estate, a uniqueness vineyards, which is upper from a winemaker. The 70% of the Contino's wines is coming from this great vineyard. So this 30% is not so relevant. And I like that the people, when the people think about Contino, think about our vineyard and our winery, not about Jesus or me. And in terms of answering deeper, perhaps I like to not change, but I like to pick up our grapes earlier, trying to look for more acidity, because I like to get older wine in the future, and perhaps some changes in relation with the white wine and garnacha, in relation with the Contino Reserva, Gran Reserva, Olivo, and Graciano. I think it's enough to keep the same quality. Of course, it's a challenge for me and for our team to fight with global warming. Perhaps we are gonna change some things in terms of global warming, not in terms of in relation with Jesus' practices. If not, we are trying to keep this identity, personality, and perhaps some wines are going to be different in the future, but it's not a matter of me. It's a matter of perhaps global warming or thinking about the white wine or garnacha.
Wonderful.
Right?
Thank you very much. That's a very great and thorough answer. We've probably got time to sneak in 2 more questions. We've got one question. Now, I don't believe that Contino have ever made a sweet wine, but would there ever be any scope to make a sweet wine in the future?
I don't know. I think we are not thinking about sweet wine. Please, I think I've made 4 vintages at Contino, and I really believe that I'm going to need perhaps 8 or 10 more harvests in my bag to get the hang of knowing Contino in the whole microplot, in the way of aging wine. So please let me work and invest a lot of time in the next 8 or 10 vintages about improve our wines and not thinking all wines, because of course it'd be great, because I really love the sweet wines, but I think it's not a time at least for me.
You've got enough on your plate, I think.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask 2 more questions. I'm sneaking one in. But we have had a debate going on the chat about decanting wines. Obviously, it's not necessarily a one size fits all. I will say that to some members who were saying, certain producers have said yay, some saying nay. But Jorge, for your wines, what would your recommendation be about how to serve them?
Sorry, how?
How would you recommend serving your wines? Would you decant them in advance?
I'm not a decanting fan wines. I think we are living in a hurry every day, and when I open a bottle of wine, I don't like to be in a hurry. I like to spend time giving to the wine not a lot of time, because I'm a good drinker, but I prefer that the wine takes the oxygen step by step. Perhaps if we are thinking about wines coming from 70s, it'd be necessary to be decanted before releasing, but before drinking or tasting. But if not, I rather to be quiet and to give to the wine more time than of course. Well, I think it's a good way to answer you about the reduction of 938. We are talking about Spain. We are talking about full ripeness grapes, direct wines. So it's not. It doesn't mean that they are tired wines. But perhaps you are thinking about other regions, other varieties. For example, Bordeaux, very old vintages from Bordeaux. I prefer to decant them before try them. But thinking about Contino wines, I think it's not necessary. Not be in a hurry and let the wine express by itself, little by little.
I think that's a great answer. I think a lot of producers, and particularly actually we've had other Rioja producers say something similar, that actually your glass can be the decanter. You can allow the oxygen of your glass to let the wine evolve as you drink it. So that's fantastic. Okay, I'm not going to rush. I've seen a great foodie question, but we'll get you to answer that in writing and let you have some time to think about it, because I'm sure members would absolutely love to know what to eat as they drink your wines. But one question that everyone's always desperate to ask, and we've had a few people on the Q&A already, is it possible to visit the Contino, but also the Cune vineyards when we're able to travel?
Of course, we'll be very delightful to have all of you here, because I can I've tried to bring the goodness of Contino to you through Zoom, but it's not possible. The best way to understand a wine from anywhere, it's putting your foot in the vineyard, having the chance, the possibility to taste with us. And of course, if you really love the wine, one key fact to be to become an outstanding wine lover, it's travel. It's travel. I miss as everyone. I miss travel a lot, but I'm missing travel to the other wine regions because it's very helpful to understand the wine business, and of course, it's very enjoyable. And so, please come to visit us. We are missing all of you, and you are very welcome to Contino and to Rioja, Cune, Viña Real, Imperial, and Contino, of course.
That's absolutely wonderful to hear, Jorge. I'm sure, I have no doubt, as soon as we can travel, you'll be inundated with Wine Society members. I'm writing a long list of places I'm. Yeah, you might not see me in the office very much next year.
At the same time, I promise you, I'll go back to UK because I really enjoy my travels to UK with my good friend Carlos or Hatch Mafia people, because the best place. For me, it's the best place in the world to discover wines from all over the world. And of course, the best Contino bottles I've tried in my life took place in London. So I promise you, go over there as soon as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Jorge. Thank you, members, for joining this evening. To Gil and Catherine behind the scenes as well. And to you, Pierre, I will hand over to you for a final goodbye. But yes, from myself, a personal heartfelt thanks for this evening. It's been absolutely cracking. So thank you.
And thank you for hosting it so brilliantly, which I think is the third event of the week that we've done. So thank you, and thanks, Gil and Catherine, with all the stuff that you've done in the background. I hope, and I'm sure that you all got a really good insight there into Contino and into Jorge's just passion and attention to detail as to what he's doing at Contino. I think I can go as far as extending the invitation to members are always welcome at Contino, at Cune. Rioja is a terrific place to visit. So when things start to normalize, it's so easy to go to Rioja. You fly to Bilbao, it's an hour and a half's drive, and not only is the wine good, but the food is fantastic too. Jorge, thanks for all of your time. Thanks for talking us through everything, and wishing you well. Cheers, and I hope to see you in person sometime soon. So thank you very much, Jorge. Night, everyone.
I hope so. I really hope so, and thanks to all of you. It's been a great pleasure. Sorry about my English today, because my English is my level of English is medium, but since lockdown, it's terrible day to day. So thank you so much for your patience, for your attention, and let me make my first virtual toast ever. So thanks so much about your support, Pierre, on behalf of the Wine Society. I've been talking about this relationship today, but I think it's a wrong word to describe this relation. I think it's a friendship. So thanks on behalf of the Wine Society, from all of Cune team, and good luck. Keep safe, and of course, I hope to see you very soon. Thank you so much. Be safe.
Be safe. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Buenas noches. Gracias.
Night.